There are places where time stands still, where the wind carries whispers instead of news, and where life clings stubbornly to existence rather than thriving. This valley was one of those forgotten places, tucked between colossal, weathered mountains, and shrouded in mist during dawn and dusk. It existed outside the world's interest and mercy. This was not just a setting. It was a prison and sanctuary alike. Here lived a man, once mighty, now humbled by illness, and his devoted wife, both worn down by the cruelty of time. But their hope was embodied in a boy, young, slender, eyes too big for his face, too wise for his age. His name? Lost to time for now. What matters is what he carried. Not just water from the distant stream, not just scraps of food for his family, but dreams forged in silence and obedience. He was the beating heart of a forgotten lineage. The boy's days were an endless loop of duty, fetching water before the sun rose, tending to the arid soil that bore no fruit, and whispering secrets to his goat, his only companion, who never judged, only listened. That goat, old and mischievous, became his mirror of resilience. She wandered often but always returned, until one day she didn't. The disappearance of the goat struck like thunder on a dry day. His father's coughing had worsened. His mother's eyes, once vibrant, now stared into nothingness. But the goat's absence was different. It pierced his spirit. He couldn't explain it. But deep inside, something told him that this wasn't just about an animal. It was about fate, with nothing but a makeshift rope, determination, and a heart full of urgency. The boy set off at dawn. He climbed paths no one dared, stones cutting into his feet, shadows stretching longer than they should. Hours passed, just. As the sun began to descend, painting the sky in crimson streaks, he saw her, his goat, perched by a formation of rocks, as if standing guard. But she wasn't standing. She was lying still, not dead, not sleeping, waiting. Behind her, obscured by time, moss, and the stubbornness of nature, was a crevice. No, a mouth. A cave that inhaled silence and exhaled secrets. The boy stepped closer. The air turned cold. The cave's darkness seemed to resist the light of day, swallowing it instead. And then it shimmered, a glint, green, alive, an emerald. Not just any gemstone. This one pulsed. It breathed. It watched. The boy's breath caught. He reached out instinctively, but then recoiled. Was it cursed, sacred, or simply destiny? Something inside him shifted. His legs trembled, but not from fear. It was awe, recognition. Somehow he knew this stone was more than treasure. It was truth, silent, buried, and waiting for him. He wrapped it in cloth, heart pounding like drums in war. When he turned back, the goat had stood. She walked beside him, as if nothing had happened, as if she, too, had fulfilled a mission. That night, sleep didn't come. His father groaned in fevered dreams. His mother wept in the kitchen, trying. To stretch a single onion into a meal, he hid the emerald, but dreams don't hide. That night, the boy saw fire, cities of gold, a man with a crown turning his back on power, a boy running across deserts, chased by voices that called him Barakat, a name he had never heard but felt rooted in his bones. The next morning, a letter arrived, carried by a hawk, with gold-threaded feathers. No one in the valley used hawks. No one in the valley wrote letters. The seal bore a mark, a lion with emerald eyes. What followed would tear apart everything he believed about his father, because the man dying in the room next door once walked among kings and left it all behind, and now destiny had returned for its heir. The boy could not sleep. Long after the stars had taken their throne in the velvet sky, he lay awake, the emerald tucked tightly beneath a loose floorboard, his mind burning with questions. The parchment still whispered to him, even though it lay silent in the wooden drawer. The hawk that brought it had vanished into the mountains, but its presence, like the letter's message, had not left him. To the true son of the lion, bearer of light, and last seed of Barakat. He repeated the words over and over in his mind, until they no longer sounded like words, but like a prophecy. Who was this lion? What was Barakat? And what did any of this have to do with him? An orphan in all but name, a boy whose hands were more calloused than a field worker's. Morning brought no relief. When he stepped into the sun-bleached kitchen, his mother stared at him, not with the soft love of a mother, but with the dread of someone who had hoped the past would stay buried. "You found it, didn't you?" she asked. He said nothing. Her hands trembled as she placed a cup of bitter root tea in front of him. The stone, the letter, the vision. "You saw something." Still, he said nothing. She exhaled, defeated. "You were never meant to live this life," she said, her voice cracking. "But we tried to protect you from what lies beyond these mountains and from who you truly are." At last, he looked up. "Who am I?" Her silence spoke louder than a scream. She walked to a box hidden beneath the floor. From it, she pulled a cloak, green, embroidered with a golden lion rearing over crossed swords. She laid it on the table. It shimmered in the morning light, ancient, regal. "This belonged to your father," she said, "before he became the man you know." "Jahan," the boy whispered, remembering the name from the night before. She nodded. "Jahan ibn Malik. El-Barakat," she said, "the Lion of the East, heir to the throne of the Emirate of Barakat, a land now broken by betrayal and greed. He gave up everything to save his soul and yours." "Why?" he asked. "Because power comes with blood, with loss, with enemies who smile with gold teeth while stabbing your back with jeweled daggers. Your father knew it would destroy you if you grew up in it. So he ran." The boy's world swayed. "So I'm the last of a dynasty," she finished for him, "and they have finally found you." He felt like a storm was rising inside him. He didn't ask how she knew. They always knew. Mothers see further than the sky itself. "But why now?" he asked. "Why send the letter now?" "Because your father is dying," she said, voice hoarse, "and the lion's blood cannot disappear quietly." That night, the boy sat beside his father's bed. The man was barely conscious, sweat beading on his brow. His breath came in shallow gasps. "I found it," the boy said. "The stone, the cave." His father's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in years, a sharpness returned to them, a fire not even death could extinguish. "You went to the cave?" the man rasped. "Yes." "You took the emerald?" The boy nodded. His father closed his eyes. "Then the path is opened. I prayed it never would be. Tell me the truth," the boy said. "Tell me who I am." "You are my greatest sin," the man whispered, "and my greatest hope." The boy's breath caught. "I was born with armies at my command," the father continued, "but I abandoned it all. Your uncle, my brother, killed our father and took the throne. I would not fight him. I would not become like him." His hand reached weakly for the boy's. "But you will have no choice." "Why me?" "Because blood calls blood. And the empire is not dead. It's only sleeping, waiting for a true heir, waiting for you." The boy wanted to scream, to reject it all, but deep inside, he felt it. That pull, that destiny, that fire that refused to go out. "Go to the city of Kelar," the father said. "Find the old servant of the house, Yasin. He will guide you." "But what about you?" The man gave a hollow chuckle. "I've already walked my path. You must choose yours. And beware, once you leave this valley, there is no return." That night, the boy stood on the edge of the mountain, the emerald around his neck, his father's cloak on his shoulders, and a bag packed with nothing but bread, water, and fire in his blood. The valley was behind him. The world was ahead. And fate. Fate was already watching. The road to Kela was less a journey and more a rebirth. Each step away from the valley, from the humble wooden door that had framed his childhood, peeled away the identity the boy once thought unshakable. The air grew thicker, the terrain more treacherous. Rocky paths clawed at his feet, and the wind whispered things he could not understand. It wasn't nature resisting him. It was the world remembering who he was. For 3 days, he traveled alone, feeding on roots, dew, and a determination forged not from ambition, but from truth. Truth that had exploded like thunder in his small world. His father Jahan wasn't just a dying man with a past. He was the former heir to an empire lost to betrayal. And he, the boy, was now the final ember of a legacy the world thought extinguished. When he first glimpsed Kela, it shimmered through the heat like a vision. But as the haze cleared, it revealed itself as a fortress city built into stone, towering, with domes, minarets, and bridges suspended across impossible chasms. The scent of spice, sweat, and secrets filled the air. Kela was alive but not welcoming. He entered unnoticed, his face unknown, his lineage forgotten by time but not by fate. The city consumed him with its noise, merchants barking over prices, acrobats performing mid-air, and soldiers dragging chained rebels through the streets. Opulence and brutality danced side by side in Kela. He clutched the emerald beneath his shirt like a talisman. It had grown warmer, humming softly when he passed certain corners of the city, as if reacting to something, someone. For days, he searched for Yasin. He asked in alleys, in markets, in ruins. Most ignored him. One merchant laughed in his face. Yasin, the ghost. He died when the last lion fell. But the beggar near the fountain did not laugh. Seek the lion gate, the old man rasped, eyes pale and blind. Where the blood first stained stone, the forgotten still remember. That night the boy found it, hidden behind crumbling pillars. On the city's edge, the lion gate was less a gate and more a wound in the earth. Stained carvings, half buried in moss and ash, depicted a lion pierced by 3 swords. He stepped through it. What followed was a descent into memory. The stairs beneath the gate led him into an underground sanctuary. Faint blue flames flickered to life as he passed, casting shadows that moved independently of his steps. Symbols adorned the walls, ancient, pulsing with faint emerald light. And in the center sat a figure in white. "I was waiting," the figure said without opening his eyes. "Are you Yasin?" the boy asked. "I was. Now I am the keeper." He stood, revealing a frame bent with age, but eyes sharp with unyielding clarity. "And you are Barakat's final breath." Yasin guided the boy through chambers that smelled of dust, incense, and forgotten sorrow. He spoke of Malik the Wise, the grandfather the boy had never known, of the Council of Blades, who had torn the empire from within, of how Jahan had walked away, bleeding but unbowed. "This," Yasin said, placing a hand on the emerald, "is not a jewel. It is a soul stone. It contains the last will of Barakat's throne. Only a true heir can awaken it." The boy looked into Yasin's eyes. "Why didn't my father use it?" "Because he chose peace. You must choose purpose." Yasin led him to the obsidian vault, a sealed chamber that had not opened in 20 years. The stone door bore the sigil of the lion and the phrase, "Only blood remembers." The boy placed the emerald into a hollow in the stone. It fit as if carved for it. The vault trembled. The door split open. Inside, a wall of obsidian reflected more, and then a face. It reflected lineage, fate, and fire. "Speak," Yasin whispered. The boy stepped forward. "I am Barakat reborn. I am the son of Jahan. The last lion lives in me." The obsidian pulsed. The chamber filled with sound, a deep, guttural roar that was not just a voice, but an awakening. The wall rippled like water, and words emerged. From it, ancient and in a tongue older than empire, blood of the betrayed. Flame of the silenced, rise now, for the world has slept too long. Barakat must return. The emerald around his neck blazed, his mind filled with images, an army in shadow, cities burning gold, a throne shattered in two. He saw traitors marked, in flame allies cloaked in light, and a crown hovering above his own reflection. Then silence. He collapsed. But when Yasin lifted him, the boy's eyes burned green. "The voice has returned," Yasin said, breathless. "The Empire has felt you." "What now?" the boy whispered. "Now," Yasin said, helping him to his feet, "the forgotten will remember." Above them, far beyond the stone, thunder rolled, though no clouds had gathered. In a village miles away, a child screamed and pointed to the mountains. "The lion roars again," he cried, and across distant sands, in the halls of false kings, spies trembled, because the heir of Barakat had spoken, and the empire had heard. The arrival of the forgotten army did not go unnoticed. As the lion's signal echoed through the bones of the empire, it stirred not only loyalty, but fear. Across distant palaces and hidden fortresses, those who had profited from the empire's silence began to move their pieces. Far beyond the Temple of Vigil, where red sands swallowed the horizon, the capital of the usurpers lay coiled like a serpent. Drazak. Its towers of obsidian and copper glistened under a cruel sun, and its throne sat not beneath banners, but beneath chains. Here ruled Zareth the Hollow, blood brother of Jahan and butcher of the old court. Time had not withered his ambition. Though decades older, his eyes burned with suspicion. When the horn was sounded, Zareth rose from his throne in silence and descended into the chamber beneath the palace, the chamber of echoes, where no truth could be hidden. There he placed his hand upon a slab of black stone. "Tell me what awakens," he commanded. The stone shimmered. "The blood has returned," it answered. "The heir lives." Zareth clenched his jaw. "Then Barakat will burn before it rises." He summoned the Bladebound, an elite cadre of assassins raised from birth to obey without question. Men and women whose tongues had been cut, eyes replaced. With sand-glass lenses, they moved without sound and killed without leaving shadows. Their task: find the boy. In the line, back in Kelar, the boy, still nameless to many but no longer faceless, stood before a council of rebels who had waited lifetimes. Yasin introduced them one by one: Soraya, flame priestess of the Daughters of Flame; Kyle, the exiled captain of the Ashen Riders; Thimra, a child oracle who had not spoken in 7 years. They did not kneel. They studied him. "Is he the lion?" Soraya asked. "He is the storm," Yasin answered. The boy did not claim greatness. He did not declare himself king. He only told them what he saw: visions, warnings, truths etched in the stone of his soul, and they listened. That night, as the rebels made camp in the ruins of the old palace baths, the Bladebound struck. They came not with war cries, but with silence. 3 died before a torch even dropped. Thimra screamed, her voice shaking the sky, the first word she had spoken in years: "Run!" But the boy did not run. He stood atop a broken column, emerald blazing at his chest. When the assassins approached, he raised his hands. Light erupted. Not fire. Memory. Every soldier saw their past. A mother's face, a forgotten promise, a scream they had buried, and in that moment, their blades faltered. Kyle struck first, cutting one down. Soraya burned another alive. The fight was brutal. And 5 Bladebound lay dead. 2 escaped into shadow. The boy collapsed again, blood on his hands, not his own. Yasin cradled him. "You fought with the soul of the Empire," he said. "But at what cost?" Freedom always cost blood. The survivors looked to him now, not with doubt, but with belief. And far away in Drazak, Zareth stared into the flames. "He remembers," he whispered. Then he turned to his war council. "Begin the purge, leave no root untouched. I want the valley scorched, the mountains sealed, the names of the old gods broken. If the lion seeks a war," he leaned forward, "then we shall bring him an apocalypse." The arrival of the forgotten army did not go unnoticed. As the lion's signal echoed through the bones of the empire, it stirred not only loyalty, but fear. Across distant palaces and hidden fortresses, those who had profited from the empire's silence began to move their pieces. Far beyond the Temple of Vigil, where red sands swallowed the horizon, the capital of the usurpers lay coiled like a serpent. Drazak. Its towers of obsidian and copper glistened under a cruel sun, and its throne sat not beneath banners, but beneath chains. Here ruled Zareth the Hollow, blood brother of Jahan and butcher of the old court. Time had not withered his ambition. Though decades older, his eyes burned with suspicion. When the horn was sounded, Zareth rose from his throne in silence and descended into the chamber beneath the palace, the Chamber of Echoes, where no truth could be hidden. There he placed his hand upon a slab of black stone. "Tell me what awakens," he commanded. The stone shimmered. "The blood has returned," it answered. "The heir lives." Zareth clenched his jaw. "Then Barakat will burn before it rises." He summoned the Bladebound, an elite cadre of assassins raised from birth to obey without question. Men and women whose tongues had been cut, eyes replaced. With sand-glass lenses, they moved without sound and killed without leaving shadows. Their task: find the boy. In the line, back in Kelah, the boy, still nameless to many but no longer faceless, stood before a council of rebels who had waited lifetimes. Yasin introduced them one by one: Soraya, flame priestess of the Daughters of Flame; Kyle, the exiled captain of the Ashen Riders; Thimra, a child oracle who had not spoken in 7 years. They did not kneel. They studied him. "Is he the lion?" Soraya asked. "He is the storm," Yasin answered. The boy did not claim greatness. He did not declare himself king. He only told them what he saw: visions, warnings, truths etched in the stone of his soul, and they listened. That night, as the rebels made camp in the ruins of the old palace baths, the Bladebound struck. They came not with war cries, but with silence. 3 died before a torch even dropped. Thimra screamed, her voice shaking the sky, the first word she had spoken in years: "Run!" But the boy did not run. He stood atop a broken column, emerald blazing at his chest. When the assassins approached, he raised his hands. Light erupted. Not fire. Memory. Every soldier saw their past. A mother's face, a forgotten promise, a scream they had buried, and in that moment, their blades faltered. Kyle struck first, cutting one down. Soraya burned another alive. The fight was brutal. And 5 Bladebound lay dead. 2 escaped into shadow. The boy collapsed again, blood on his hands, not his own. Yasin cradled him. "You fought with the soul of the Empire," he said. "But at what cost?" "Freedom always costs blood." The survivors looked to him now, not with doubt, but with belief. And far away in Drazak, Zareth stared into the flames. The purge began at dawn. Not with trumpets or fire, but with silence. Villages across the outer ridges of Barakat woke to find their wells poisoned, their elders missing, their symbols of the old empire shattered underfoot. What Zareth had commanded, in a single sentence, now rippled outward like a storm unchecked by reason. The valley, the cradle where the boy had once lived as a nameless shepherd, was not spared. In the early grey light, soldiers clad in black veils descended like locusts. They spoke no words. They carried sigils scorched into metal, their swords gleaming not with steel, but with venom. The villagers had no chance. Mothers were dragged by their hair. Men were cut down as they reached for farming tools. Children were silenced before. They could scream, and among them stood one figure cloaked not in black but in crimson, General Vexra, the hand of Drazak. She was the flame beneath Zareth's throne. Raised from the ashes of palace conspiracies, Vexra believed not in empire, but in extinction. To her, the lion was not a rival. He was an infection. Her voice, though rarely used, carried through the air like cold iron. Burn the valley. Leave. The bones, salt the soil. Far away, the boy stirred from a fevered dream. In it, the sky bled gold, and his home collapsed into dust. He awoke breathless. Yasin entered with urgency. The valley burns. He did not speak. He rose, clothed himself, took up the emerald, and wept. For the first time since awakening the empire, he felt powerless. "Do we have riders near?" he asked. Kale, ever alert, nodded. "2 squads in the eastern hills. Tell them to fall back. No one must die for what has already been lost." But Thimra approached him, silent as always, placing a trembling hand on his chest. "You were not born to save ashes," she said. "You were born to rebuild." So instead of vengeance, he chose reckoning. He summoned the voice again, not in a vault, but under open stars. The ancient language burst from his throat like wildfire. Across the land, his allies heard it, not with ears, but with blood. And from the sands, the marshes, the icelands, they began to march. Within days, camps formed along the broken roads. What had once been scattered sparks were now fusing into fire. Refugees poured in from the valley, hollow-eyed and grieving. One boy, face smeared with ash, placed a withered goat horn at the heir's feet. "They killed my father," he whispered. The heir knelt, eyes locked with the boy's. "Then they will remember him in the walls we build, and in the silence we break." That night, they began to dig. Not graves, but foundations, and as they worked, word spread that Zareth had claimed the valley as his own, that he now sat atop scorched earth like a god of ruin. The boy stood before his army and raised the soul stone. "This is not a war for revenge," he declared. "This is the reclaiming of breath, of blood, of birthright." And every soldier, priest and orphan raised a fist in answer. In Drazak, Zareth sat on his throne of bone and laughed. "He wants to build," he spat. "Then let the architect drown in his own walls." And beside him, Vexra sharpened her blades. For Barakat's soul had stirred, and the storm was only beginning. As winter fell early over the southern ridge, Barakat's new heart beat from a rising stronghold, Embergate. Named not for fire, but for resilience, it was the place where ash turned into stone. What started as a refugee encampment had become a fortified bastion, built by hands once trembling from grief and now calloused with purpose. Embergate's walls rose not from conquest, but from memory. Each brick was carved with names, fathers, mothers, children lost to Zareth's purge. And in the center, beneath a dome of salvaged bronze, stood the soulstone altar. It glowed brighter now, not just with power, but with unity. The boy, now the lion in whispers, no longer walked alone. Around him, the council had grown. Soraya taught torchbearers how to wield fire as both shield and message. Kyle trained young warriors in the art of silent movement. Himru watched the stars and warned of signs that even ancient texts failed to capture. But Embergate was not hidden. Zareth's spies reported its rise. And he knew, if this bastion stood, Barakat's spirit would spread like wildfire. So he sent. Vexra, the hand of Drazak, marched south with legions bred not from loyalty, but fear. War chariots thundered across stone plains. Siege beasts, mutated remnants of the Empire's old war experiments, hauled spiked towers toward the horizon. Embergate. At days, Yasin called the council. "We cannot abandon it," he said, "but we cannot hold it." The boy stood silent, then said, "We do both." That night, he rode with Kyle through hidden canyons, speaking to elders of mountain tribes who had sworn neutrality for generations. He did not ask for warriors. He asked for architects. "We need tunnels," he said. "We need smoke. We need illusion." By dawn, the mountain tribes agreed, not for gold, not for politics, but because the lion had asked them as kin. As Vexra's army neared, Embergate changed. False gates were built, walls reinforced from behind with wood soaked in oil. Tunnels stretched into the cliffs where children, elders, and scrolls were hidden. When the siege began, it was not fire and blood that met the enemy, it was confusion. Banners appeared where no soldiers stood. Arrows rained from moving walls. The air shimmered with smoke, disguising real movement. And beneath their feet, the soil betrayed them. Traps set in tunnels, ambushes in hollowed stone. Vexra realized too late. Embergate was not a fortress. It was a mirror. Every cruelty of Drazak now reflected back at its army. The siege lasted 6 days. On the 7th, the sky cracked open. Thimra had warned of the eclipse. She had seen the sun swallowed whole in her visions. As darkness fell at midday, the lion climbed the tower. In his hand, the horn of vigil. He sounded it once, and the cliffs answered. Mountain tribes emerged with thunder drums. Rebel factions hidden for decades charged from caves. The forgotten army struck from behind enemy lines, cutting through chaos like blades through silk. Vexra fought like flame. She reached the tower's base, but the lion stood above, calm. "We are not your reflection," he called. "We are your reckoning." Lightning struck. The tower shattered. Vexra vanished in the rubble. When the dust cleared, Embergate still stood, bruised, scarred but unbroken, and the world whispered a new name, the fortress that roared. From that day, songs spread across the empire. Songs not of conquest, but of resistance, and the lion, once a nameless boy from a dying valley, now stood as the storm's heart. Barakat was rising, and Zareth's throne began to crack. The sky above Drazak darkened, not with weather but with omen. Thunder without clouds echoed across the horizon. Birds fled the city in droves. Dogs howled into the wind, and children were born silent. The capital, once smug in its dominion, now felt the pulse of reckoning crawl beneath its stone streets. Zareth stood in his black chamber, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the mirror of war. It shimmered with unrest, not chaos, but alignment. "The lion comes," it whispered. He dismissed it with a wave, though his eyes betrayed his unrest. "Then let him find a throne carved from his father's corpse." But even he knew Embergate had changed the game, not just in blood, but in belief. The lion had done what no rebel in 50 years had dared, survive, and now he advanced. The march on Drazak was not led by an army. It was led by memory, through scorched fields, over rivers that once carried warships, across canyons where traitors had been buried alive. The people of Barakat returned. Behind the lion walked not just warriors, but healers, scholars, orphans, and ghosts. They carried torches and tears, and every step cracked the foundation of Zareth's illusion. The capital prepared. Walls were reinforced, ditches filled with oil, catapults loaded with black fire. The last of the blade-bound assembled at the gates, their faces masked in silver, hearts emptied of mercy. But within the city, unrest grew. The people, long silenced, began to paint lions on their doors. In the markets, whispers turned into chants. Bread was given freely, guards were disarmed by song, and in the Temple of Hollow Light, the high priest removed Zareth's name from the Book of Thrones. He knew it then. His city was no longer his. The final battle began not with a charge, but with silence. The lion stood at the front lines, holding the horn aloft. He did not speak of vengeance. He spoke of return. This is not conquest. This is remembering. Then he sounded the horn. The gates of Drazak did not shatter. They opened. From within, the citizens surged forward, not in fear, but in defiance. They tore down banners. They overturned siege towers. And when the lion entered, flanked by Kale, Sariah, and Thimra, the people knelt, not to worship, but to acknowledge. Zareth fled to the inner sanctum, where shadows had once obeyed him. But there he found only light. The lion confronted him, not as a warrior, but as truth incarnate. You were my uncle, my blood, and still you chose rot. Zareth, defiant to the end, lunged with a blade made of broken promises. But the soulstone pulsed. The blade turned to ash, and the throne cracked beneath them both. In the final moment, Zareth's eyes met the lion's. You were never meant to win, he spat. No, the lion answered. I was meant to endure. With Zareth's fall, Drazak did not collapse. It exhaled. Light filled its streets. Bells rang that had been silent for generations. And high above, in the tower that once cast shadow, the lion raised no flag, only a flame. Barakat had returned, but the war, the lion knew, was never truly about land. It was about soul, and now for the first time in centuries, the soul of Barakat breathed freely. Now to you who followed this journey to the end, tell us, what would you do if you discovered that an empire lives within you? Would you choose silence, like Jahan, or rise like the lion, even before legions, even carrying the weight of centuries on your shoulders? Share in the comments. What was the most powerful moment of this saga for you? Was it the lion's awakening, the people opening Drazak's gates, or when memory proved stronger than fear? Share this video with someone who needs to remember that even the forgotten can bring down empires, that even the invisible can become legend, that even the purest can become fire. Barakat was not just rebuilt, it was felt, it was chosen, it was remembered. And like every great story, this one doesn't end here, because as long as there is silence, there will be voices ready to break it until the next awakening.